Hey guys, welcome back to Fantasy Tipped. My name is Julian, and in today's episode, we're going to be talking about the Buffalo Sabres and their players, how they're going to look this year for fantasy. Now, most of you, I know what you're probably thinking. The Buffalo Sabres are a dumpster fire. Yeah, they are. They're absolute trash. They're not going to have a good team at all this year. They're going to be, bottom 5 teams in the NHL for sure, and they're going to end up with a really high draft pick at the end of the year. That being said, you still have to play fantasy hockey, right? And you can't just ignore the team altogether. Like, someone is going to have to score points on that team. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Before we get started, guys, please leave a like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. I'm trying to get to 1,000 subs this year. So if you're not subscribed, please hit that subscription. It's completely free, and it would mean the world to me. Jumping into the lines now, I project the top line being Jeff Skinner, Casey Mittelstadt, Victor Olofsson. Second line, Bjork, Cozens, Thompson. Third line, Ruotsalainen, Asplund, and Hinostroza. On defense, Dahlin, Jokiharju, Haig, Miller, Butcher, and Pissick. And in nets, they got Craig Anderson and Dell, and I'll be staying away from both those goalies for obvious reasons. Without further ado, guys, let's jump into the highest ranked player on NHL's top 250 fantasy players list for this season. That player is Jack Eichel, ranked 48th overall. Am I drafting Jack Eichel at 48 overall? As it stands, hell no. That's way too risky. He still needs surgery, and Buffalo is not letting him get the surgery because he's supposed to be traded, and they're just waiting till he's traded to actually let him get the surgery, because Buffalo doesn't want to let him do that because it's kind of a risky surgery. It doesn't make a lot of sense. Anyway, it's a complicated situation. But until Jack Eichel is traded, unless he is before your draft or before the season starts, I'm not drafting him in this range. There's so many good players in this range. It just doesn't make sense to draft Eichel at 48. Players in this range are Jonathan Tavares, Ehlers, Connor, Gaudreau. Like, these are like point per game guys, and it just does not make sense to draft a complete unknown like Eichel in this range. So unless things change, I'm not drafting him in this range, definitely. The only other Buffalo Sabres on NHL's list is Rasmus Dahlin, ranked at 195 overall, the 43rd defenseman. Now, I know what you guys might be saying. He had a pretty brutal year last year with only 23 points in 56 games, a really big decline from the previous season. Yes, that's true. But at the same time, he's a very good young player, and he should be getting better every single year. I do think last year was an outlier. I do think they don't really like being around Jack Eichel. He's probably a negative presence in the locker room. It's very clear that he did not like playing for Buffalo, and him being their captain definitely was not a good thing. I do see Rasmus Dahlin having a better year this year, and where he's being drafted with a bunch of really, just not great fantasy options like Brett Pesce, Bowen Byram, and Mark Giordano. So I do actually kind of like where he's being drafted. So if you do need a defenseman and you're at that point in the draft, I absolutely do not mind drafting Rasmus Dahlin. Just be careful of that plus minus. Now, just talking about a few players that didn't quite make NHL's top 250 list, but they still might have some value. There's one guy who really jumps out to me, and I'm shocked that he's not on NHL's list, and that's Casey Mittelstadt. He had 22 points in 41 games, which isn't anything that crazy, but if you guys remember, he had 17 points in his last 22 games. That was pretty much a point per game to end the season. That was after Jack Eichel stopped playing for the year, so this guy really started popping off when he was one of the guys who had to shine because there was really nobody else. This year, he may get a top-line role, which could possibly make him shine even more. This guy was supposed to be a really good player, and he just never showed his potential until last year at the end of the season. Like, he really was a disappointment to where he was drafted, right? But honestly, I think he might be an absolute steal, considering he's not even right now ranked in the top 250 players. Personally, I'm going to be drafting him because he's super low risk and insanely high reward. At this range, you really cannot go wrong with Casey Mittelstadt. And these numbers at the end of the season were played at a second line with Rasmus Asplund and Tage Thompson. Really not great players, just showing how good Mittelstadt was at the end of the season. The next guy on this list is Victor Olofsson, and he's probably lying honestly just outside the top 250 players. And at this range, I don't absolutely hate him. I don't think he's going to be that great. And he's not, unlike Mittelstadt, he didn't pop off once Jack Eichel left, which is a little concerning because he does really depend on Jack Eichel for his production. So I'm not super high on him, but if he's a little bit further than 250, I'm kind of indifferent to him at this range. Next is Jeff Skinner with only 14 points in 53 games last year. He absolutely sucked. But this year he's probably going to get a top line role. And he had 10 points in his last 21 games, which is kind of promising. Do I necessarily see him doing well? I don't think so. I'm definitely not drafting him. But he's someone I would probably monitor, keep an eye on, see how he does at the beginning of the season. He's someone who could definitely turn it around from the miserable last couple of seasons he's had. Next is Dylan Cozens. And he was as third-line center last year. He didn't do that great, 13 points in 41 games, but he was a 19-year-old. He's a really young guy. He's got a bright future ahead of him. Will he necessarily do amazing this year? That's to be seen, right? He could potentially be that top-line center in Buffalo because we don't really know what it's going to look like in Buffalo. Last but not least is trade acquisition Will Butcher, who had 11 points in only 23 games last year. New Jersey, for some reason, just did not want to play Will Butcher. He's not a great defensive player by any means, but if he gets power play time, that's when he becomes valuable. He had that breakout season in 2017, 2018, which was 4 years ago, with 44 points in a full 82 games. That was a really great season for him, and since then he has not really been able to match that. But if Buffalo somehow gives him that top power play time, when they don't have that many great players, so why not put both him and Dahlin on the top power play? It's possible. So if they do that, Butcher could have some fantasy value. You'll have to keep an eye out for that, but I wouldn't draft him in your draft unless you have like a really insanely deep draft. All right, guys, you've reached the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching all the way through. Please leave a like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. I really appreciate it, guys. Until next time, stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll catch you in the next episode of Fantasy Tips.